This particular accusation from the report by the FBI, though, is especially disturbing because the FBI didn't do anything to carry this through and seek search warrants to recommend to the Justice Department's lawyers that they seek an indictment. And there are a number of documents. I haven't been through, obviously, more than a handful, but there are a number of documents that all point to a lack of action by the FBI, which is itself quite disturbing.
Hello and welcome to the Trump Report. I'm Maddie Hale. This is a special Saturday edition of the show. Of course, we're usually Monday through Friday, but late on Friday, UK time, the DOJ dropped over 3 million files from the Epstein files. And so we're kind of reacting live to what's been happening. So my guest today is Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, professor at Rochester Institute of Technology, and author of an array of books on Donald Trump, Professor David Cay Johnston. Thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Glad to be with you, Maddie.
We need to start off with just an overview of what's happened, Professor. So 3 million files from the FBI they seized from Epstein's devices, his property, victims' testimony, witness material, evidence shared by partner agencies. This was all passed over to the DOJ. It has taken years to kind of make, I guess, this public and go through it. This is, of course, because there's been ongoing investigations, victim protection, redactions, national security and privacy concerns. But what happened late last year is that lawmakers passed this Epstein Files Transparency Act. Trump had no choice but to sign it through, and that's why we have it now. I want to get your thoughts, David. You and I are just going to stick on Trump's involvement, him being named. We can, down the track, get into other big names being in these files, but let's stick with the president for now. So just your initial reaction to reading some of these files.
Well, first of all, the 3 million pages, 800,000 separate documents, is only half of the material they're supposed to release. And they've said, that's it. We're not giving you any more because it's not relevant to the law. So there's going to be a big controversy about that in the courts. But the documents that have been released include what are called 302 reports. That's the basic FBI report on a field investigation, including one in which a 13-year-old girl at the time says that Donald Trump sexually assaulted her. In fact, she was hit in the face over what was perceived to be improper conduct by her servicing Donald Trump. Now, the White House says it's just nonsense, didn't happen. But it is the first time now that we've gotten an FBI report that FBI agents were told by a witness about this happening. There are a number of emails back and forth between Trump and other people and references to him. There are some emails involving his wife, Melania. And there's a lot of redactions, more redactions than I think are appropriate. And undoubtedly, there will be some court action about whether they excessively blacked out material so you couldn't read it.
And you mentioned these 6 million files, and I think 3.5 million have now been made public. And just for our audience, Trump hasn't ever been accused of any wrongdoing or criminality by law enforcement, but this is the first public, I guess, acknowledgement of victims or second-hand people coming forward. Am I correct, Professor?
Well, Trump has never been charged by law enforcement. But there are a number of young women, very, very underage girls, 13. In the U.S., the age of consent is 18. So not even close. It's not like a dolled up 17-year-old who have accused him of rape and sexual assault. And in the U.S., statutory rape is a serious charge. If you're convicted of it, you're going to serve prison time. But law enforcement has never criminally charged Trump. But civil allegations of what would be, if law enforcement pursued them, serious felonies are in the record now. And we can read them clearly. And this takes us beyond the civil lawsuits where various young women under oath have asserted that they were sexually assaulted by Donald Trump when they were as young as 13.
And we'll get into the specifics because you and I are going to read out some of the testimony, some of what's alleged in these files. But before we get into that, you said 6 million files are in the hands of the DOJ.
6 million documents.
Documents.
6 million documents.
Are you under the understanding that this will spark more suspicion now than ever?
Oh, I think the fact that they have said, we've given you a little over half and we're not giving you any more is absolutely going to prompt more litigation. The two members of Congress who were behind the Epstein disclosure law, one's a Democrat, the other's a Republican, have gone to court saying, a lot of this stuff should not be redacted, blacked out, and a lot more should be released. And the Trump administration has filed papers saying, you have no right to go to court, and there is no enforcement mechanism in the Trump Epstein files disclosure law. So tough luck. Now, that's a very interesting question. If Congress passes a law and Trump signs a law saying you're to release all of these things, and he doesn't, the Trump administration's position is, we choose not to do so. So we're not bound by the law that Donald Trump signed.
Now, Professor, he is named multiple times in the files, the documents that we've seen, and it will be impossible to go through absolutely every accusation and name for this interview, but let's go through some of the highlights that happened. So one of the claims is that a caller claiming direct victim experience to the FBI New York Office Task Force. So this is labeled the Mar-a-Lago Calendar Girls child abuse allegation. So in this is what the file says. Donald Trump, the president, had parties at Mar-a-Lago called Calendar Girls. Jeffrey Epstein would bring children in and Trump would auction them off. They were taken in rooms, forced to give oral sex to Donald J. Trump. I was 13 years old when Donald Trump raped me. Now that is a wild accusation, and of course complete stark contrast from Trump's Trump basically said he ran in social circles with Jeffrey Epstein during this time. Of course they hung out, but he says he had no understanding or involvement in these sex trafficking rings or these sex parties.
So let me just put one line ahead of this, Maddie. That you are named in these files tells you nothing. People like Jeffrey Epstein, who was running an extortion ring, basically, they surround themselves with people they perceive to be powerful and influential to create an aura of invincibility and don't mess with me. So there are a lot of people named in the files who are there solely because Epstein was building up his buffer zone around him. This particular accusation from the report by the FBI, though, is especially disturbing because the FBI didn't do anything to carry this through and seek search warrants to recommend to the Justice Department's lawyers that they seek an indictment. And there are a number of documents. I haven't been through, obviously, more than a handful, but there are a number of documents that all point to a lack of action by the FBI, which is itself quite disturbing.
Another one that really, and you mentioned this at the start of the interview, Professor, in around 1990, a New Jersey underage oral sex allegation. This is what it says. It says, reported an unidentified female friend who was forced to perform oral sex on President Trump approximately 35 years ago in New Jersey. The friend told Alexis that she was approximately 13 to 14 years old when this occurred. The friend allegedly bit President Trump while performing this sex act. The friend was allegedly hit in the face after she laughed about biting President Trump.
Yes, and that's another strong example of how could you as a law enforcement officer read that and not say we have to take further action, whether it's to determine if the witness is reliable or not, which would be one of the first steps, or to move toward a prosecution. And you would think you would pull the files on other cases. And just one little related anecdote to this. About the time this supposedly happened, 1989, actually, a year before, I was walking with Donald on the Atlantic City Boardwalk, and I asked him about the adjudicated cases where his casinos had been plying a 13, 14-year-old, in fact, in one case, a 12-year-old, letting them gamble in the casinos. You have to be 21, not 12. Giving them liquor, limousines, hotel suites. And I said, what about this? And I thought he would say, yeah, it was a mistake, or I fired the subordinates. And Donald just coldly looked at me and said, yeah, I paid a fine, which gives you a great indication of his lack of any moral character about things. I paid a fine. 12 and 13-year-olds gambling and giving them liquor and hotel rooms and limousine rides?
Well, his children would have been teenagers at that stage, Professor.
Yeah, just about, yeah.
Yeah. Another accusation in 1987, so 2 years before that meeting between you, a caller called into the FBI on their friend's account, said that in 1987, a victim was out drinking, ended up at the Trump Plaza. Victim 1 saw Donald Trump, wanted to meet him. Victim 1 woke up naked and saw with $300 on the bed. Victim 1 didn't remember how she got to the room. She remembered seeing a flash of Trump's face. She called the person who reported this and told her that she thought she had been raped. That's another allegation. There's also an allegation in 1995, Professor, where a limousine driver makes a complaint, picked Trump up to take him to Dallas Fort Worth Airport during the ride. The complainant recalled some of the things Trump spoke about on his cell phone that were very concerning. Complainant noted that Trump repeatedly stated the name Jeffrey, and one of the complainant's ex-girlfriends told the complainant that Trump had raped her, as did Jeffrey Epstein. So, I mean, those are just two separate accounts of allegations of rape.
So the significance of this, Maddie, is that we're not talking about a one-off. I mean, people go to law enforcement agencies, they go to reporters like me, and they tell you they've committed some crime, then they haven't. People make stuff up, okay? Even though it sounds crazy, trust me, I've had people come in and tell me they committed the murder I was writing about in the newspaper. This is multiple reports, and you're just talking about the FBI reports. I mean, there is the plane load of 12 and 13-year-old girls from France who were flown from France to Epstein Island and then back the next day. And border officials at both ends didn't question what was going on, and presumably they were told, oh, these are here models for a shoot. But nobody questioned what was going on. I mean, this is a serious failure of law enforcement to look at what's right in front of their eyes and recognize that they're getting repeated complaints and there's a pattern here. And if I can go one further, one of the most disturbing documents involves Trump's golf course in suburban Los Angeles, in Palos Verdes, and a threat to someone that if they talked about what was going on with 13-year-old girls there, that they would end up fertilizer on the back 9 holes of the golf course. That is important because it takes it from Epstein Island, Epstein's mansion in Manhattan, Mar-a-Lago in Florida, to all the way across the country in Los Angeles, and suggests a much brighter and broader pattern of sexual abuse of little girls than we had known before these documents were released.
And just reiterating the fact that Trump has denied any knowledge of
Absolutely.
the sex trafficking ring. And I just want to re-emphasize that because some of the claims in these files, David, one talks about a prostitution-related party that took place in Mar-a-Lago. One person wanted to go to the party and at one point was said, no, these are just for prostitutes. Between 2004 and 2005, Trump reportedly, a caller claimed he was present at a sex trafficking party hosted by Epstein. Said in 2009, 2005, Sir Ivan Wilczek hosted a party where Epstein, Sammy Sosa, and Donald Trump were in attendance. Several women were being auctioned off. I mean, this is just bizarre. And then Epstein's assistant names Trump as a party guest, along with Bill Clinton in 1986 until 1991, and then 1992, that he was present. And then another says that there was big orgy parties. A caller claimed his attendance to the FBI, saying caller named other individuals involved in big orgy parties with her other young girls, older Victoria's Secret models, including Bill Clinton and Donald Trump. So, I mean, there is not only these wild allegations of sexual assault, Professor, but just even seeing him present at these prostitution parties, these orgy parties.
Well, first of all, if you reach the age of consent and you have a sex party, there's no issue. There should be no interest fundamentally by law enforcement in something like that. People have sex parties in England and the US every day of the week. The issue is, does it tell you something about the credibility of the complaints brought in by or on behalf of 13, 14-year-olds? And I think that's the significance of those, that if you have these other events going on, then does that add some credibility, and should it prompt a thorough investigation of the complaints that were made by or on behalf of 13, 14-year-old girls? I think that's the significance of this, not those acts per se.
Well, let's get into that, Professor. Do you see this heading towards investigations, criminal prosecutions, potentially? I mean, we've obviously seen Donald Trump charged with the crimes before, faced his own trials, but do you see the President of the United States being investigated, and along with other high-profile names?
There's absolutely no chance that the U.S. Justice Department will do anything, because Trump's Attorney General, Pam Bondi, was the Attorney General of Florida. I've called her the utterly corrupt Pam Bondi. When citizens complained about Trump's scam university, Trump University, which he eventually had to admit was a fraud and refund some money to people, she shut down the investigation, and she accepted an illegal $25,000 campaign contribution from Trump's charitable foundation. Charitable foundations are not allowed to give money to campaigns. She took the money, and her staff defended taking the money, which tells you that they are lawless. So the chance the federal government in this administration will do anything is zero and none. But also, Jeffrey Epstein died 6 years ago. The statute of limitations for any crime I've been able to imagine, and I teach law, out of these events is more than 5 years ago, the statute of limitations period. So I don't see the prospect of any criminal charges. What I do see is the prospect of serious civil litigation, and there are lawyers representing, it appears to be a couple hundred of what the most recent indications are of more than 1,000 13, 14, 15-year-olds who were sexually assaulted. So I think you're going to see the civil litigation. And of course, the Trump administration will try and stop all of that litigation, as they've been doing for as long as it's been filed.
Well, how do you think these allegations against Donald Trump will affect his presidency? Do you see these files being the demise of him as a president?
Not these files. I don't think there's anywhere near enough here. A lot of smoke. I mean, just billows of smoke coming out of the basement of Trump Tower, and Mar-a-Lago. But I don't think this is enough. I think what potentially could force Trump out, or be forced out by his cabinet under the 25th Amendment of the American Constitution, is irrefutable photographic or video evidence of Donald Trump assaulting a 13 or 14-year-old. There is court testimony under oath, written testimony, but under oath, that Donald Trump did exactly that, and that there is such evidence, photographs and videotapes. That's why it's important that they've got 3 million more pages or individual documents that they have not released, and they say they're not going to release. Now, I will also tell you, in America, on American radio and podcasts and TV shows, I've had people push back and tell me that they don't care, because Trump isn't doing that now. He did that in the past. And if that's true, that says something absolutely horrible, in my view, about morality in America in the 21st century.
Yeah, you mentioned these videos, so I'm just going to read off the document. So it says claims. It says the victim reportedly knew about criminal activity that occurred in multiple states on airplanes, and told complainants that there were films of prominent men such as Epstein, Clinton, and Trump, and that Ghislaine Maxwell is in these videos as well. So if these videos come to light, the chances are very slim, Professor, but if they do come to light, that would kind of force Trump to resign.
Well, I don't know if it would force him to resign. I have a hard time, knowing Donald as I have for almost 40 years, resigning, but being forced out is another matter. I mean, it would be a real test of, the House would impeach him, even with the current Republican majority, if that happened, I suspect. But would the Senate give the 2/3 votes? The Senate is essentially 50-50 right now. you need 67 votes to convict. And I don't know. That would be very revealing. But Trump will be mostly vulnerable if that sort of evidence comes out. By the way, there's another way to get at this evidence that gets very little attention. When the FBI or other law enforcement agencies in America execute a search warrant and take your property, whether it's your computer or cell phone or anything else, they leave you, first of all, a detailed inventory. And when they no longer need the materials, they're supposed to return them to you or provide you with verified copies. Now, Todd Blanche, the #2 Justice Department official who was Donald Trump's criminal lawyer at the case where he was convicted of 34 felonies, Todd Blanche has indicated that they haven't released material they regard as child pornography, the mere possession of which is a crime. Just looking at it is a crime. Well, what I described as the evidence that would, I believe, lead to people pushing Donald Trump out of office is by definition child pornography. So they've basically signaled that if we have pictures like this or video of Donald Trump, we're not going to let you see them because they would be pornographic by nature because they involve a serious offense against a child, sex offense against a child. But the estate should have copies of all of these. And I suspect if the Democrats gain control of the House, that in 2027, they're going to subpoena the estate for the records. And then we would have a much better chance of finding out, is there photographic evidence that Donald Trump is a repeat child rapist, or in fact, is he being wrongly accused and mistreated? And if he's being wrongly accused, the obvious question to ask is, why are you not releasing all the files if you have no risk here?
So these files being made public, Professor, it just shows how high the stakes are now for the midterm elections.
Yes, I think you combine that with what's happening in the American economy. Things are going badly compared to the Biden administration. Compare it, add to it the raids in Minnesota and elsewhere by these masked agents with no badges on, who are seen in numerous videotapes saying things like, "If you speak to me disrespectfully, I'm going to erase you." And I'm an American citizen. We don't care, and they throw you in the back of a car. That is hurting Trump very badly. He's down to roughly a 1/3 approval rating. That's a big drop from his election where he got 49% of the vote, just under half.
Professor, do you think the DOJ did enough to protect the Epstein victims? Because I want to read out this joint statement where they condemned the incomplete Epstein file release. So they said that the files being released was sold as transparency, but what it actually does is expose survivors. Once again, survivors are having their names and identifying information exposed, while the men who abused us remain hidden and protected. That is outrageous. As survivors, we should never be the ones named, scrutinized, re-traumatized, while Epstein's enablers continue to benefit from secrecy. This is a betrayal of the very people that the process is supposed to serve.
Well, I agree. I don't see any reason to release and unredact the names of the now grown women, but who were 13, 14-year-old girls at the time. But they're also clearly holding back the names of Trump's friends. And Trump has publicly said, well, I'm concerned here that my friends will be hurt. The law is very specific. They are not to protect reputations in making redaction decisions. Significantly, the new document dump includes Howard Lutnick, Trump's commerce secretary, who owned the townhouse next door to Jeffrey Epstein's in Manhattan, and who has said that Epstein was running an extortion racket by getting compromising photos of men with underage girls. I mean, he didn't say it as fully as I did, but it's very clear from his remarks that's what he's saying. Turns out he's in the files. A lot of other people are in the files. Nothing about it suggests Lutnick did anything improper. Let me be very clear about that. But the way they have redacted these files, I think, does leave the Justice Department open to accusations of partisanship. And putting Lutnick's name out there would be one of the few places they can say, no, there's no partisanship. Look, we put Lutnick's name in there. But a lot of the redactions appear to be politically motivated. We're not going to be able to find out about that unless the two congressmen, the one Republican, one Democrat, who are behind the Epstein Disclosure Act, are successful in court and able to get behind those redactions. And by the way, What reason is there to not let Congress in closed door meetings see all of the files completely unredacted? I can predict to you what the Trump administration would say. Well, we can't show you any of the child pornography. You can't see that. Even though you couldn't prosecute for that crime if you were a prosecutor without seeing it. I mean, it's a catch-22.
Just a final question. How do you think Trump and his White House will respond to this going forward? We've seen that when Trump is really in hot water, he throws out something else as a distraction. So I wonder if you think that he might strike Iran or, provide more aid to Ukraine out of nowhere just to kind of get the heat off him.
Yeah. Donald, when cornered, is very feral, and he's in feral mode right now, mostly because of the killing of the 2 citizens in Minneapolis. There have been 3 murders this year in Minneapolis, 2 of them by Donald Trump's ICE squads. He will do anything that will get people off of this. So his threats to invade Cuba, to engage in some kind of serious military action against Iran, which has 1 million soldiers, seizing Greenland, all sorts of things he's going to do to try and divert attention away, because one of the things Donald understands is news tends to focus on a few things at a time. You can't follow all of this. And so his interest will be in marginal little references to the Epstein files, and then doing something big to have everybody concentrate on it and ignore the other things that are going on. So we're going to see more distractions, more of his bellicosity, even though he ran for office saying no more foreign wars, but he's proposing all over the place invasions and seizures and taking over other nations' sovereignty.
And we're going to be following this story for the next week on the Trump Report. There's obviously so much that's going to come out of this. As we mentioned, 3.5 million documents in this drop. Potentially more. I would imagine not from you and I's conversation, but to kick off this analysis of what's happened, Professor David Cay Johnston, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report.
Thank you, Maddie.